Good morning. Thank you. My name is Sarah Morant. I'm the Acting Director of Communications and Stakeholder Relations with the Regional Municipality of Wood Buffalo. Thank you for joining us here today. We are here to release the lessons learned and recommendations from the 2016 Horse River Wildfire as prepared by KPMG. In a few moments, we'll be joined by Mayor Melissa Blake, our CAO Annette Antoniak, and Fire Chief Jody Butz. They will each be making a statement, and then we will open the floor for questions. We will do a round of questions for the media that are in the room, and then we will turn to our callers that are on the phone. If there's an opportunity to repeat that process, we will do so. Thank you for your participation, and I will now invite in our speakers.
She wants us to get closer.
Oh.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Annette Antoniak, the Interim CAO for the Municipality of the Wood Buffalo region. Before I turn to Mayor Blake and Chief Butz for their comments, I would like to explain how we arrived here today. Using a competitive procurement process, the municipality posted an RFP on April 3rd, 2017. The scope included, but was not limited to, conducting a lessons learned review to capture what worked well as identifying opportunities for improvement and making recommendations for changes to the RMWB's emergency management system. KPMG was subsequently awarded the contract, which was signed on May 5th, 2017, which brings us to today. This report is not about placing blame. It is about identifying key learnings from our experiences that can benefit our organization and strengthen our region. It also provides an opportunity to share our knowledge with others across the country so that other communities will benefit from what we have learned. By embracing the information and recommendations in this review, we will improve the way we conduct emergency management on behalf of our region and our operations as a whole. I would like to thank our staff, emergency management partners, residents, businesses, public sector partners, and the First Nations and Métis communities who shared their perspectives and experiences with KPMG through interviews, focus groups, working sessions, and surveys to help us arrive where we are today. There are 14 recommendations identified in this report, and we are committed to implementing and embedding the lessons learned from this report into our organization. As implementation occurs, we will provide updates to the public. That is our commitment to you. The report, Lessons Learned and Recommendations from the 2016 Horse River Wildfire, is available at rmwb.ca/wildfirereview. At this time, I would like to ask Chief Butz to speak on the report.
Good morning. This review has presented us with the opportunity to reflect and to learn. There are some hard truths that we have emerged throughout this process. However, we are accepting these truths and embracing them as a catalyst to change. I believe that it is absolutely essential to note that our staff, emergency management partners, and the Alberta Agriculture and Forestry all acted with the best intent. The effort given by hundreds of staff who are also residents should not be overlooked in what was truly an unprecedented event. We experienced the sheer power of an out-of-control wildfire, and despite this, 88,000 people were evacuated and 90% of our residential structures were saved by the courageous men and women who never gave up. In the context of this disaster, these are considered positive outcomes. This is in no way discounts the losses that our community suffered, with no greater loss than the lives of Emily Ryan and Aaron Hodgson. We've learned that through communications between the RMWB and forestry could have been better, as could the process of achieving unified command. Had we arrived at a common understanding of the situation earlier, the timing of the May 3rd mass evacuation may have been different. The review identifies that the structure and governance of our organization at the time of the wildfire may have created conditions that limited the RMWB's ability to prepare, mitigate, and respond to a disaster of this magnitude. Through the experience of responding to the wildfire, Regional Emergency Services identified barriers to success that could be addressed without delay, many of which are included in the recommendations found in this review. We've improved our wildfire situational awareness by building strong relationships with our counterparts in forestry, which were tested through the 2017 wildfire season and proved to not be just functional, but both efficient and effective. We're rewriting the Municipal Emergency Management Plan and we'll be working with stakeholders to develop the community-based hazard and response plans that will be tailored to each community in our region. Approximately 300 partners, staff, and emergency management stakeholders have been trained through the emergency management courses since the wildfire, and we've conducted 2 emergency management exercises with another 2 coming soon. 74 staff and community members have completed emergency social services courses, and 2 emergency social services exercises have been conducted with 2 more planned this fall. We're developing a unified fire smart strategy and are making our wildfire mitigation strategy a priority. Furthermore, we will be updating the emergency management bylaw and creating a high-level strategy to address disaster risks, all of which will improve our ability to prepare for, mitigate, and respond to and recover from future disasters. This report has given us the perspective we needed to be able to take the hard look at the areas that we need to improve upon. We are not going to shy away from addressing these issues, as we have a duty to the residents to ensure that we are doing our part and make our region both safe and resilient. We've learned that we as a population need to be better prepared to address and what is the #1 risk to our community. Thank you, and Mayor Blake.
Okay, thanks, Jody, and thanks, Annette, as well. Before I get into my remarks, I really want to take a moment to acknowledge the current wildfire situation that's occurring in BC. And our hearts absolutely go out to the people that are living with the uncertainty that comes from experiences like that. And certainly firsthand, Wood Buffalo understands what that's like and everything that comes along with it. And we want that province and all of the people that are impacted to know that we stand with you and that things really will get better. And I'm certainly very hopeful that one of the outcomes of this report here today, and I think Annette touched on it a little bit, is that it's going to help other communities navigate through disasters. And I can confirm just how important this document is, not merely to us in Wood Buffalo, but perhaps far beyond. The certainty that I have comes from the value that our region gained by having the benefit of lessons learned by other communities in similar circumstances. Slave Lake, of course, being the most significant. Our community has experienced a number of emergencies in the past, and in recent history, we've responded very efficiently and effectively. In fact, on the 1st of May, I witnessed just how effective our staff and responders were in evacuating residents from Gregoire, Perry Creek, and Centennial Park. At that point in time, I would say that we were dealing with an emergency. But what would come on May the 3rd was a disaster of unprecedented magnitude. And yet it was against insurmountable odds that 88,000 people were evacuated, critical infrastructure was protected, and 90% of the residential structures were saved. And it's a testament, I believe, to the incredible work of our first responders and our partners, of whom this community will forever be grateful. And when I think back to those days in early May, I ask myself whether my own family was truly prepared. Did we have a plan in place? Did we use fire smart principles around our own home? And looking back, I can say with absolute certainty, despite the fact that I knew well what was happening on the 1st of May, on the 3rd of May, I know that I could have and should have been better prepared. We have an opportunity, though, right now to become a more resilient community, and this means more than ticking off a few check marks. It's a state of mind that should influence everything we do. Making a region-wide commitment to resilience is a significant change that requires time and continued effort. It means that coming to accept the way that we did things before the fire can and should be improved. It means we're going to have fire breaks close to homes, especially on those green belts. It means that we should be implementing each of the 7 disciplines of Fire Smart. Moving forward, though, each and every one of us has to be willing to adopt and commit to a philosophy of resilience. As we embrace this, we build a stronger community collectively. As a council and administration, we are committed to continuous learning and improvement, and we are committed to implementing these recommendations. And working with our citizens, we know that we're committing to building a stronger and more resilient region. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now take questions from the media that are in the room.
So, as has been mentioned.
Sorry, Mitch, if I could ask you to come to the microphone, and that way the recording can also pick up your question.
Great.
Thank you.
So, as has been mentioned and acknowledged, last May was unprecedented, seems to be the word everyone's using. But I know the report notes the rural communities were not prepared for an immense disaster like this, even more so than the city itself in some cases. So, do you agree they were overlooked at the in the MEMP the way that the report muses? And before the fire, had there been any consideration into maybe re-examining their role in a disaster?
One of the recommendations out of the report is the change of the governance, and with that change involves the community stakeholders' involvement and to your question, the Indigenous participation in that. That's certainly been recognized, and moving forward, they will be a part of all of those emergency management priorities within our region, and they'll have a stake in all of those decisions.
Okay, I'm just curious, I mean, had re-examining that relationship before the fire been considered by anybody? I know, for instance, that the Conklin multiplex is supposed to have space for disaster emergencies, and I had heard that back in 2013, 2014.
I'm not going to speculate what was in the past, and certainly, but moving forward, we're going to, those stakeholders within our region, they're going to be involved in under that new governance model, and that's going to be support all of the, really place emergency management, the priorities of emergency management at the forefront.
Okay.
I'm just curious, reading through the report, there's some sections that talk about how senior emergency officials in the REAC didn't fully understand the threat didn't understand some of the important terms in there. How concerning is that to every one of you, and what's happened since then to ensure that doesn't happen again specifically?
Yeah, it's very concerning out of the report to understand that. And what you're speaking to is that situational awareness. And I think that's been, I've certainly said it prior to, we took action on that very shortly thereafter the wildfire in 2016. And improving our situational awareness, certainly with our forestry folks. We've exercised and implemented some of those changes, and we've went through the 2017 wildfire. And it's shown to be very efficient and effective. We're not going to stop there, though. We're going to continue to improve there. From a situational awareness piece, there's lots of tools and information that we need to make sure that we get into the decision makers of the time to make those appropriate decisions.
And how does that fit in then with the evacuation? We've heard some criticisms from some people wishing that the evacuation could have been a little faster, and some talk about here saying that it could have been improved as well. How important is that situational awareness in getting that evacuation to work appropriately?
It's critical. Yeah, that the situational awareness piece comes from, as the report outlines there, the unified command. Could have and should have been better, and we've already made steps towards making that better through relationships with the forestry, again, which will improve that situational awareness, and I'm confident that we're in a much better place now.
In the report, stakeholders reported that sprinkler plans for each community had been deployed, but were not. And then sprinklers were made available, offered to you guys, turned down, then later requested. If they were in place initially, how do you think this could have saved some structures, and are they being put in place now?
The use of sprinklers is not a direct attack when it comes to forest fire. It's more of a preventative measure to preventing the encroachment of a wildfire into an urban interface piece. And what you're speaking of there is the interface piece. speak to your question directly, the sprinklers are more effective and most effective on the ground fires and the grass fires. What we witnessed here was, again, unprecedented in size and scale, and I think well documented, 300-foot flames. The use of a sprinkler system in that scenario would have been minimal, or the effectiveness of a sprinkler system. Since that time, though, we haven't ignored that fact, because our hazard still remains for the rest within our region, and we have purchased sprinkler trailers and expanded those resources throughout the region.
After the provincial reports were released, you mentioned you really no surprises in those reports. Do you feel the same way about this report presented today?
We're certainly accepting all 14 of the recommendations in the report, and we're using this as a catalyst to change and improve areas within our organization and within our region to better or prioritize the emergency management within our region. Again, there's a lot of moving parts there. The governance piece is another piece that will support that. And the goal here is to recognize and to prioritize some of those hazards within our region, and then ultimately making our community a resilient place.
One thing that the report mentioned was that it was unreasonable to have perhaps the fire chief as the head or the director of emergency management. Do you know why that was unreasonable? Can you give us some more detail about that? And has anything changed? Is the fire chief still the head of emergency management when it comes to emergencies?
So the position of the fire chief also shares the position of the director of emergency management. That remains. But what has changed is in last the CAO and the organization has went through a realignment in January of this year, and we have the reporting structure from the fire chief is directly to the CAO now, more streamlined and more efficient. And certainly we've changed some of the structure within the Emergency Operations Center where there's a liaison, where the CAO is now involved in some of those, I guess, decisions. And the biggest help there is communicating out back to the original question of communicating to mayor and council and stakeholders, making them more informed.
So the fire chief is still the head? Yeah.
That's correct,
Okay.
yes.
And so what was the report talking about, that it was those responsibilities were maybe too much for one person to handle? Can you give us an example of that?
Well, the example is the wildfire itself. On May 1st, the municipal or the MEMP and the plan worked effectively. As you can recall, on Sunday, May 1st, there was the effective evacuation of the Prairie Creek and the areas south of Fort McMurray. I'm going to take you back to the fact that the size and scale of this incident is unprecedented. I can't say that loud enough. And really challenged some of the structure and the organization or the functionality in the EOC, and which is why you see that in the report. To share both of those, the fire chief and the director of emergency management in the same role, certainly challenged that. But we've made strides towards improving that. Like I said, the realignment, we've changed the restructure in the Emergency Operations Center, and the CEO is directly involved now helping out with those communications.
We're just going to check and see with our callers on the phone if there's any questions there. If you do have a question, may you please clearly state your name and your media outlet. Thank you.
Yes, a question from John Connor, Canadian Press. And the question is to Mayor Blake. Mayor Blake, you mentioned British Columbia fire situation. I'm wondering, based on the report and based on all you've been through in Fort McMurray, what your message is to communities that could face wildfires? What should they be doing now so they're in a better position to avoid what you folks went through last year?
I think there's an awful lot of merit to the fire smarting and the 7 principles within. Frankly, we had been fire smarting since back in, I guess, 2010. And unfortunately, what we experience in community is that when you take trees off the green belt, people get quite concerned and agitated by it. But frankly, when we experienced what we did last year, we understand directly how significant that is in terms of the outcome for the neighborhoods that are potentially impacted. So the fire smarting is absolutely, I think, a critical component to helping to mitigate. It won't change the face of the wildfires, but it will change how the human interface happens with them.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the phone? Hearing nothing, we'll take additional questions in the room.
The emergency management bylaw that you've spoken of, what specifically is that going to contain? Or I apologize if it's already been introduced, but or if it has, then what does it contain and how is that going to make some of the changes?
Are you good with content?
Yeah,
We-
I can speak to that.
Sure.
So the bylaw that exists today is very, very old, and we will be taking the 14 recommendations and the new structure that is created as a result and putting that into the new bylaw that will come forward to mayor and council.
So that's going to focus on things like the preparedness to deal with evacuations and governance structures and all of that kind of
Absolutely,
thing?
yes.
And one question to Mayor Blake, just on the funding as well. Reading through it, there is some talk about building better and the goal of that in the sort of ongoing recovery and resiliency issues and the challenges that that faces because that costs money and it doesn't necessarily work well with insurance. How is the RM going to help deal with some of those funding gaps, or maybe in talks with the province or the feds? How will you deal with that moving forward?
And part of the difficulty is that when we have the concept of building back better, we expect our neighborhoods to be more resilient in terms of that interface with the boreal environment. And frankly, the problem that people experience is the cost of doing so. If your insurance policy will cover what you had before, and what you had before was not fire resilient, you're probably going to end up with the same outcome. And so the difficulty that we have is in trying to ensure that our neighborhoods are built better. So at the municipal level, we do have control over the bylaws. I look at my own neighborhood, we've got cedar roofs and spruce trees all around, and that is not intelligent. But my architectural control says I have to build back the same way. I'm saying, no, we need to change some of those things to ensure that people have the ability to upgrade and be more conscientious about the fire smarting.
Any additional questions?
Can you tell us if industry offered any help to assist with the wildfire? Yeah.
Yeah, when on May 3rd there was an outpouring of support both from the provincial, from industry, provincial at different levels. So to answer your question, yes, there was. And
Did you accept that offer?
there was,
To help with firefighting?
yeah, so I'm going to take you back to the situational awareness and where the best, there was challenges there, the outpouring of support, and then the challenges was deploying that support effectively in the right means versus just accepting all this support and not having a plan for it. So yes, we did accept all of that support eventually, but in an organized manner.
Mayor, just one more question. After seeing all of this, how much more prepared do you think Fort McMurray is if this happens again? And if it does happen again, if all of these things are implemented, could you prevent what happened last year?
Again, I can't speak to nature's course in prevention, but I know we can do an awful lot more for the mitigation. So even when we came back into the community after the event, we were in the fire smarting mode and taking away some of the things that could create hazards. We've left neighborhoods with significant change along their greenbelt spaces. It was easier to do, certainly right after that monumental event. But frankly, when you ask if we would be better prepared, I have no doubt that we would be better prepared. The report is going to direct us to articulate those things. But in practice, the fact that we survived the way that we did that day gives me incredible hope that no matter what comes our way, we will find a way to be that strong, resilient community that we were, except that now we're going to have a very strong, unified command that's going to help us get the right information at the right time and send the right messages to our citizens. And the sensitivity that comes from living through an event like that means I'm going to have a plan in place when these events are threatening us at our doorstep.
I'd like to take a moment to go back to the phones. If there's a question there, again, just your outlet and your name.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Nicholas Pilkey from Metro Canada.
That's very nice.
I was wondering if cost of following the 14 recommendations?
So for the room, it wasn't very loud. The question was looking for an estimate of the cost for the 14 recommendations.
Oh, boy.
Exactly, thank you very much.
I could tell you the cost of the report, but I can't tell you how much all these are going to amount to. A lot of it is internal work that we simply need to do. It's part of our day jobs, and there shouldn't be a tremendous new burden from that. Some of the other things that are in there will come forward to council as budget requests for whatever might be required. So I think the report really gives us a tremendous opportunity to change structurally what we've got in place.
Thank you. And there was a woman's voice on the phone. Please go ahead with your question. I know you've been waiting.
Thank you. It's Carrie Tate from the Globe and Mail. And just before I start, when you guys are answering, could you step a little closer to the mic because we're having trouble hearing you in there? I'm looking at the Fire Smart recommendations, and it looks as though there were gaps in Fort McMurray's program. Why was Fire Smart not executed in the years leading up to the fire?
That's a good question. The fact of the matter is we've been doing Fire Smart in the community since 2000, and based on funding and grant funding to support all of those hazards and risks. The fact that the wildfire, and I think you can look at this around the globe, our neighbors to BC, the fact that wildfire is becoming a more and more I guess, a risk and hazard to the urban interface piece is bringing more attention to that, and I'm confident that the funding for Fire Smart in our region and throughout the country is going to increase, and we're going to put a plan in place. Like we said, we have a strategy in place, and we have some funding for the next 3 years, but it doesn't stop there. We're going to continue to do that. Fire Smart needs to be, is one of the pieces of making our region and our community a resilient place to live.
What was the shortcoming in the years leading up to it? Was it that you didn't have enough money, or you just weren't, you had money but were not implementing the strategy?
I'm not going to speculate exactly that because I wasn't those to make the decision, but I do know that moving forward, the attention towards Fire Smart and mitigating a risk, and certainly in our region, is going to be at the forefront.
Mayor, can you answer that question? You were there.
I've been here for 19 years, frankly, and every time we look at taking a tree down, we get 100 complaints about what the impact on the neighborhood will be. So I'll say that there's an impact that comes from community psychology related to the forest and the environment that we have. It's highly valued, and I think that because we want to have that near our neighborhood so greatly, Fire Smart runs into a bit of resistance. The efforts that we've put in over that time certainly were influenced by the budgets of the day, and we had an awful lot going on in that same time period in terms of growth and competing issues. Now we've got an economic downturn that has an influence. The grant funding that we received in the past for Fire Smart was significantly less than what we've seen post-fire event, and the more you have, the more you're capable of doing. But that psychological influence that people have, our acceptance level right now in this community is so much higher because of the actual experience.
And I'll go back to the phone. I'll just go back to the phone one more time to see if there's any questions there. I'm hearing nothing, so if there's any final questions in the room.
Really briefly, is there any estimate of how many of these recommendations have already been implemented in this last year? Even roughly?
Yeah, I would say there's pieces of the majority of the recommendations have already taken place, and action plans and moving forward with some of them. Certainly, we're going to have to get it to an end state where we can have something measurable and show some of the progress. But I can tell you that the majority of them have already, in some form or fashion, have already been started.
And the cost of the report, did you say that? Yeah.
It's $246,000.
And seeing no further questions in the room, I'll ask our speakers if you have any closing remarks you wish to share.
I do, if I could. So thank you. In closing, I have one more comment. Going forward, I want residents to understand that implementing the recommendations in this report is not just a priority for administration and council, but also a priority for me personally. This is my home, this is my wife's home, and this is my children's home. As a husband, a father, and a fire chief, I want to be able to say to other communities, here's how we became more resilient. I can't do it alone, administration can't do it alone, neither can council. As a region, everyone must commit to becoming more resilient. I look forward to working together as we continue our journey towards becoming the resilient community I know we can be. Thank you.